When you hear the word yoga, what image comes to mind? For most people, it's someone on a mat doing complicated postures, stretching, sweating, maybe meditating under a tree in some peaceful retreat. But if Patanjali, the ancient sage who wrote the Yoga Sutras, saw what the modern world calls yoga, he might be confused. He might even say, "This is not what I meant." Because for Patanjali, yoga had almost nothing to do with poses. His version of yoga was a philosophy of the mind, a radical, structured path toward inner control, clarity, and liberation. Patanjali lived in ancient India, probably sometime between 200 BCE and 400 CE. And although little is known about his personal life, his influence has echoed through centuries. He didn't invent yoga, but he systematized it. He gave it a structure. He put the wisdom of many spiritual traditions into one concise manual called the Yoga Sutras, a collection of 196 brief but powerful statements that form one of the greatest texts ever written on mental discipline and self-mastery. The very first line of the Yoga Sutras tells you everything: Atha Yoga Anushasanam, now, the discipline of yoga begins. And the second line? It cuts to the core: Yoga chitta vritti nirodhah, yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. That's it. Not handstands. Not stretching. Yoga, in its truest sense, is the ability to still the mind, to silence the noise, to free yourself from the endless chatter that pulls you in every direction. Patanjali believed that most of us live in bondage, not to chains or systems, but to our own thoughts. The mind, he said, is like a lake constantly disturbed by wind. Every thought is a ripple. Some are small, worries, cravings, plans. Others are violent, fear, ego, pain. But in all cases, those ripples distort the surface. You can't see through water that's constantly moving. And so, you can't see your true self when your mind is constantly agitated. The goal of yoga, therefore, is to calm the surface so that clarity can arise, not just clarity of thought, but of being. Now, how do you do that? How do you stop the mind from spinning? Patanjali laid out a path, known as the 8 limbs of yoga. And this is where we begin to see how deep and transformative his philosophy really is. The first 2 limbs are yama and niyama, moral and personal disciplines. These aren't optional. They're the foundation. Yama is about how you treat others, non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, celibacy, and non-possessiveness. Niyama is about how you treat yourself, cleanliness, contentment, self-discipline, self-study, and surrender to a higher power. Patanjali believed that unless your life is rooted in ethical behavior, your inner work is hollow. You can't build peace on a foundation of lies, greed, or arrogance. Only after this moral foundation does asana, the physical postures, come into play. But in Patanjali's text, asana is not about mastering hundreds of poses. It simply means being able to sit comfortably and steadily, usually for meditation. That's it. He says, Sthira Sukham Asanam, asana is a steady, comfortable posture. Nothing flashy. Nothing insta-worthy. Just the ability to sit still without being distracted by the body. Next is pranayama, the control of breath. In Sanskrit, prana means life force. And breath is the bridge between body and mind. Patanjali saw breath as a tool to control the nervous system, to calm the mind, to focus attention. When your breath is erratic, your mind follows. But when breath is steady and deep, the mind begins to quiet. Then comes Pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses. This is the ability to turn inward. We live in a world of constant stimulation. Sounds, screens, smells, distractions everywhere. Patanjali teaches that peace isn't found by adding more, it's found by subtracting. By closing the doors to the senses, even temporarily, we return to ourselves. The final 3 limbs are the heart of Patanjali's mental discipline: Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, concentration, meditation, and absorption. They aren't separate techniques, but stages of inner stillness. Dharana is focused attention, fixing the mind on one point. Dhyana is meditation, a continuous flow of attention, without distraction. And Samadhi is the final goal, pure awareness, where the ego dissolves and the self merges with the object of meditation. In this state, Patanjali says, there is no you watching your breath or mantra. There is only the experience. Complete presence. No past. No future. Just now. That's freedom. That's yoga. Now, compare this to how most people view yoga today. It's been stripped of its depth, repackaged as a fitness trend, disconnected from its roots. But Patanjali's message was never about the body, it was about liberation from suffering. He saw human life as entangled in cycles of pain, confusion, and attachment. And yoga, for him, was a systematic escape, not through denial, but through discipline. This is why Patanjali's yoga is so relevant today. We live in a world of mental overstimulation, where anxiety, overthinking, and distraction have become the norm. People chase peace, but they look in all the wrong places. They change locations, relationships, careers, hoping to silence the storm. But as Patanjali would say, peace doesn't come from fixing the world, it comes from mastering the mind. That's why his teachings are so powerful. They remind us that freedom isn't external, it's internal. That discipline isn't punishment, it's power. And that stillness isn't emptiness, it's the doorway to clarity. Let's reflect on something simple he emphasized, the power of abhyasa and vairagya, practice and detachment. Patanjali wrote that the mind is tamed through repeated, sincere effort, abhyasa, and non-attachment to outcomes, vairagya. In other words, keep showing up, but don't cling to results. Just practice. Observe. Let go. That's the essence of inner strength. The brilliance of the Yoga Sutras is that it doesn't demand blind faith. It's a manual. A method. Patanjali doesn't ask you to worship him. He asks you to test his teachings in the lab of your own mind. He says, want to know truth? Stop chasing pleasure. Calm the mind. Sit still. Breathe. Watch your thoughts. Go beyond them. And then, in that silence, you'll know. And maybe that's the biggest secret of all. That truth, peace, enlightenment, they're not things you find. They're things you uncover by peeling away everything that's false. And that process, that courageous inner excavation, is what Patanjali called yoga. So the next time someone tells you yoga is about touching your toes, you'll know better. You'll remember Patanjali, the ancient sage who taught that yoga is about touching your mind, training your awareness, and discovering that the deepest freedom isn't found in flexibility, but in discipline, detachment, and stillness. In a world where the mind is constantly pulled by algorithms, noise, and fear, Patanjali's voice echoes through time, quiet but firm. Still your mind. Know yourself. That is yoga. And if you can remember that, not just in theory, but in your breath, your thoughts, your actions, then you're no longer just practicing yoga. You're living it. And that's what Patanjali truly wanted. Not more poses, but more peace.